Well, hello, church family. I'd like to be the first to welcome you to a new segment, something that we're going to do every Monday called Table Talk. This is a time where we're going to get together as a church family, maybe digitally, and we're going to discuss the sermon from this past weekend. And we're going to discuss it. We're also going to talk about ways that as a family you can unpack it, how you can continue the conversation at home. Remember, one of our goals here at First Baptist is to love God and equip the saints. And this is just a practical way for us to do that. The last thing we want to do is to throw a whole lot of information at you on Thursday nights and Sunday mornings and then just leave it alone. We really do desire to come alongside you and help you as we all disciple our kids and just unpack some of the big points from Sunday morning. So with that in mind, this past weekend we talked about Luke chapter 15. The parable of the prodigal son. Before that, we even talked about the lost coin and the lost sheep. Talked a lot about being a good neighbor and what that means. So, this is Pastor Kevin. You guys know that. Pastor Kevin deals a lot with our families. So, Kevin, as you were thinking about this past sermon and as you were in the room, what advice would you give maybe to parents that want to continue that discussion at home?
So I was in the room Thursday night and listening to the sermon and him talking just about the Christian's role and the Christian's reasoning and the Christian reward in how we deal with the prodigal son. The first thing that came to my mind was forgiveness is essential to parents and families.
Yeah.
It was completely in his right to take that son and to say, you are no longer to me, you're dead to me. But he didn't. He forgave, and we receive that same forgiveness with our Father all the time. Every time we fail, every time we have things in our life that come up, He continues to forgive us. We have to know that as we're forgiven, we are to forgive those around us. One of the first things I pulled away.
Yeah, man, that's so good. I know as a parent to kids myself, a lot of times I want them to forgive each other whenever they're fighting or whatever. But a lot of times I'm not quick to forgive them as well too. So man, that's so good. Thank you for that. Is there anything else you would share? You'd add?
Well, just as I'm going through, a parent's role is to be the main discipler to their kids.
Yeah.
And that is more caught than taught.
Mm-hmm.
As we go through our life and situations come up, we're going to have an opportunity to talk about race. We're going to have an opportunity to talk about how we are a good neighbor to people. And talk is one thing, but action speaks louder.
Amen. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we have the opportunity to show that love to our neighbors all around us every day. And so we need to have those conversations as we go and show that love.
Yeah, I think that's huge, especially now with kind of the narrative that we find ourselves in our culture. One of the things that I took away is something that Pastor Will said at the very beginning, is as a nation, we've been here before. This isn't new to us, but where the civil rights movement maybe changed laws, where it fell short is that it didn't change hearts. But the issue is only the gospel can do that. So as we continue to have those conversations with kids, I think that's absolutely crucial. I think like it or not, the reality of racism that's in our country, in our world, means that we're going to be forced to have uncomfortable conversations with our children. And I love what you said about the parent being the discipler. We have to initiate those conversations as parents because nobody else is going to from a biblical perspective. So with that in mind, we do have a few resources that we'd like to give you to kind of help you walk through these conversations. Let me be the very first to tell you that these conversations that you have with your kids or maybe just your coworkers, they're not easy. And sometimes they're not even fun, but they're absolutely needed, and they're absolutely essential. I remember back to the beginning of this year, which was only 6 months ago, but it seems like 4 years ago. I remember back to January, I was just personally praying, God, reveal more of yourself to me. Show me more of who you are. And I think he's done that this year, but he's done it through suffering. Mm-hmm. He's done it through, making us deal with things that we haven't. So with that in mind, it's important that we walk our kids through that. So 4 things that we want to share with you, and Kevin and I are going to kind of walk through these together. The first one is a book that's geared specifically for elementary age students. And it's a book called God's Very Good Idea. I have a copy of it right here. It's a very colorful, very good book. It's written by a woman named Trillia Newbell. Trillia works for the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission. And this is a very good book. And what I like about this book, not only is it colorful and it keeps kids' attention, but it talks about the heart issue that we said. It goes back to the very beginning of creation, how God created everyone in his image, but he created them differently. And then truly it does a really good job talking about how sin has distorted that, but then also how the gospel really is the answer. And the one thing that I think separates this book from the others is at the end she talks about the church. She talks about how the church should be a reflection of God's kingdom, and the church should be different. And the church should be the one place where everybody who's different can come in. And even though we may not have anything in common other than the gospel, that's enough. So this is a really good book. It's called God's Very Good Idea. Kevin, you guys have used this, and to some extent you're familiar with this.
Yeah, just that it deals with the heart issue.
Yeah.
And that is that we're, in the very depths of our soul have to be changed in Christ to be able to show love toward everybody else, toward our neighbors.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I heard Will talk about social justice and things like that in our sermon, and just dealing with the idea that Jesus was the first social justice warrior.
Yeah.
He's the one that stood up for people who could not stand up for themselves.
Yeah, blessed are the poor.
So he dealt with that. Mark 10:45 says to me, out of his word says, even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. And I think that's what we as parents, we need to, our kids need to see us not always taking the front seat, but maybe taking the back seat.
Yeah, absolutely.
We don't always get our way. We don't always do what we want to do, but what Christ wants to do in us and through us.
Yeah,
so I think that deals right along the lines of what that book deals with as well.
Yeah. And you can, at least you could last week, you could get this book at the Marketplace too, at the Calls booth. Now, to be honest, I'm not sure if it's still there. They may be out. But you can look. So at Marketplace 2, at the booth that is for the call, they did have some copies of this. And, of course, you can get it on Amazon as well. It's a very good book, definitely worth your time. I have a 6-year-old, and we're walking through all this together with him. You guys know our family. And this has been tremendous for us. It really has. So I can't recommend this book enough. Marketplace 2 or Amazon. Another book that I want to recommend to you, maybe for teenagers. So you got a middle school or a high school student that's not really going to look at this Very Good Idea book because they don't need colorful kind of things like that.
It's for kids, definitely.
Definitely. Another book called The Gospel in Color. Now, I don't have that book in front of us today because it's actually a PDF that you're going to download, but I do have a picture of what it looks like. So it looks like this. And Amazon is sold out of it, which is a good thing. So we're going to put in the links in the comments a link that explains to you how to get this book. And up until last week, it was free. I think it's like $10 or so. But it walks you through day by day how to have these conversations with your middle schoolers and your high schoolers. Hey, trust me, I know having conversations with teenagers alone is scary, but especially about this kind of stuff. So this book, The Gospel in Color, walks you through. It's called A Theology of Racial Reconciliation. It talks about the gospel at big picture, and then what is race and what is God's plan for all those kind of things. So that's a very good resource for you. And what's really cool about it is you can download it straight to your phone or your device, and your kids can put that on either tablet or whatever they have, and they can look at it on their own too. So Kevin said he saw this book last week, and my wife Angie has it on her phone. I looked at it today, so it's really good. Another that I'd like to tell you about, maybe isn't necessarily for children or teenagers, might be a little bit over their head, but for you, it's a book called Letters to a Birmingham Jail. Letters to a Birmingham Jail. Now, some of you will remember the 1960s when Martin Luther King Jr. wrote the letter from a Birmingham jail, which is a letter that he wrote while he was imprisoned in Birmingham because of the race riots. But this is a book that was written just a few years ago in response to that. So basically, it's a book that says, okay, everything that Martin Luther King Jr. wrote in the 60s was great, but again, it didn't change hearts. So this book is kind of like 2.0. I wouldn't recommend this to students or children, not because it's mature. It's just got some big words in it, and they're going to get lost. So parents, I would recommend you to look this up. You can look it up on Amazon and all those kind of things. So Letters to a Birmingham Jail, there it is. And then lastly, the last thing that I want to share with you, super practical as parents, especially this month. June 19th is a celebration that you may or may not be aware of. It's called Juneteenth. Now, you probably heard that phrase, but what does it mean? Well, June 19th, 1865 was the date that the final group of slaves in Galveston, Texas, which was the last group of slaves in America, was actually freed. And it's interesting to note that that is about a month after the Confederacy actually surrendered, so the Civil War is over at this point. 2.5 years after President Lincoln has signed the Emancipation Proclamation. So for whatever reason, for 2.5 years, these slaves were never freed. So the Union Army comes into Galveston, Texas, and stands up and reads this and says that they're free. So it was June 19th. Juneteenth is kind of putting those two together. And that's a celebration, and that's actually next week, and that happens all throughout our country. And it's a wonderful opportunity for you to look up some resources on that, and have those conversations with your family next week. And the way that you do that might be different depending on your family and ages and all those kind of things. You know your kids better than anybody else does. But Juneteenth is something that, especially now, we cannot let slip through our cracks next week. So, Kev, as we close, would you have any maybe last-minute thoughts or how to kind of wrap this all together?
Yeah, just a couple of scriptures that Brother Will hit on Sunday morning. In John 15:12-13, it says, "This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Greater love has no man than to lay down his life for a friend." And who is our friend? Well, in 13:35, it says, "By this all people will know that you are disciples, if you have love one for another."
Yeah.
I mean, that's the key, that we love one another, no matter our skin color, no matter what our socioeconomic background. We have to love one another. The church has to be the example for that.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the church hasn't always done well with that. But
Correct.
one of the things that Pastor Will said is, as we get closer to that, the Bible calls that revival.
Yep.
And many pastors have been praying for years that God would send a spirit, and that it would be the beginning of another great awakening. And I'm not so certain that this isn't it, that he's showing us more of himself through these trials and troubles. So all that to say, don't stand back. This is the time more than ever to have these important conversations with your children and your teenager, because if you don't, nobody else will. Hey guys, we love you. We are so incredibly grateful for you, for supporting the ministry that happens here, but also just the ministry that you do at home. We know that you continue to disciple your kids, especially during this unique season that we're in. So thank you for that. And we really do desire to be a resource for you to disciple your kids, but also to have conversations at work and at other places too. So, hey, know that we love you. Know that we are lifting you up. We're your best fans in all this. We want to see you succeed. And we know that this topic in particular may be a little scary and a little difficult, but just because it's difficult doesn't mean it's not worth having.
Well, and we realize too that this is a long-term journey. This is not a short-term fix. And so how will you know if this is these books and the attitudes and love are being pursued when your kids are grown and they are adults who are pursuing love, not hate, and they're doing the things that you've told them about. This is not a short-term fix. It's a long-term.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, every Monday we're going to do this table talk. We're going to unpack the sermon from the past weekend and give you opportunities to continue the conversation at home. Now, that may look differently week to week, depending on what we do. But we look forward to continuing on this journey with you. Hey, if you have any questions about anything that happened this past week, let us know. Don't forget, we are opening church. Church is going to meet physically this week. So Thursday night and then Sunday morning, 8:30 and 11 a.m. We look forward to seeing you. I cannot tell you how much we look forward to seeing you guys in person. Even though all we're going to see is your eyes because of your mask. That's great. We look forward to that too. So, hey, if we can do anything for you, let us know. We love you. If not, we'll see you soon.
See you later.